This episode contains references to murder and other violent crime which may not be appropriate for all audiences. Best not to listen to it while driving little Tucker to preschool. That'll work.
That's fine.
The following is a text exchange which occurred between brothers on July 23rd, 2021. 10:15 p.m. In the pines, where the sun doesn't shine, and I shiver the whole night through. Shiver the whole night through.
We have discussed this song in the past.
It's so good. Not just Cobain's version. There are hundreds of versions of it, many different, and many of them are wicked. Death, decapitations, lots of creepiness. And some are just about long trains. Murder ballads are a whole scene apparently. Even Bob Geldof hit the charts with one.
What about Harry Nilsson?
Coconut?
I mean, it was about illness and doctors, so maybe?
I saw a story one time about Harry Nilsson and John Lennon getting drunk and heckling the Smothers Brothers.
That sounds fun.
I had forgotten that there was such a thing as the Smothers Brothers until I saw that article. Straight from the heartland, this is Things I Text My Brother. Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of Things I Text My Brother, a series of conversations which have taken place between the brothers Drouillard on subjects spanning the neighborhood and the globe, which will hopefully leave you smarter, kinder, and better looking. Today we're going to jump off from that dramatic reading that you just heard and discuss the topics therein. Maybe we'll talk about murder. Maybe we'll talk about really long trains. Maybe we'll talk about hanging trees, raising Arizona, Kurt Cobain, Lead Belly, or Ira Louvin's mandolin. But we haven't plotted an exact course because we want you to join us on that journey. That's how it works on Things I Text My Brother. I'm Jeff. This is Brad. Let's talk about our texts. But before we dive into our discussion about hanging out in the pines and getting all murdery, we need to take a look back, because even though we're both amongst the foremost experts on these subjects within our own households, there's always room for us to correct our past mistakes and to learn more. Thus it's time for ablutions and edification. Okay, Brother Brad, well, as good as we are, sometimes we make mistakes, and we like nothing more than to correct them. I understand that you have an ablution. What did you get wrong?
Unfortunately, I did get something wrong, and I have to go back to the episode where we talked about the Fitzroberts and the Fitzwilliams and the Fitzherberts.
Oh, episode 12, yes. Fitzwalter and the really big charter.
I went down the history of the family, and I got us all the way back to Rollo the Viking.
Yes.
As he was the first Duke of Normandy, which actually in itself is another ablution. He was not actually a duke.
What?
That's an anachronistic title. He was actually just ruler. It became duke, but that didn't happen until the 11th century, so that was a couple hundred years after Rollo. But I said Rollo was the father of Richard I, but it was William Longsword who was the father of Richard I. I forgot William Longsword in between Rollo and Richard I, and that's unfortunate because that's such a great name anyway.
Longsword is a good name for sure.
Yeah.
The good news is you certainly got right that Rollos are good refrigerated, so that hasn't changed. We want people to understand that that was absolutely correct.
And that is not anachronistic.
No, not at all.
That is true today.
That's as true now as it has ever been.
That's right.
Is that your ablution, Brother Brad?
Yep, my mind is cleansed. My heart is lighter. I feel better about correcting myself.
Yeah, well, that was a good one. I'm glad it's all straightened out. As for some edification, I actually wanted to look into something from the same episode, episode 12 as well.
Do tell.
I wanted to look into a comment we both worked in at times, indirectly. We talked about waltzing Matilda. Now, Brad, do you know what Waltzing Matilda is actually about, the song? Because I didn't, and that's what I wanted to know.
I'm fairly certain I looked it up once, but I have forgotten what it is.
Well, I'm going to inform you. So just going back to our previous episode, you had said that the Maid Marian character in Robin Hood was based loosely on Matilda, who was one of the daughters of Robert Fitzwalter. You mentioned that, and then we riffed off it a little bit, and I even mentioned a rugby player named Tom Evans, and you asked me if I would waltz Matilda when we met at Ibiza or something like that. I wanted to see, what is Waltzing Matilda actually about? Does it have anything to do with dancing or waltzing? What do you think?
I would guess it has something to do with war, but I don't remember what, if it does.
Wrong.
Ah!
Traveling on foot is waltzing, so that's the phrase there. Matilda is kind of a slang term for your swag bag. So when you're walking around in Australia, in the bushland, you throw all your swag into a bag and throw it over your shoulder to carry it around. So Waltzing Matilda is actually about a man living in the bush, and he was carrying around his swag bag, and he would fling it over his shoulder, and at night he would sleep with it as if it was, maybe his wife Matilda or something like that. So Waltzing Matilda is an Australian bush ballad written at the end of the 1800s by a guy named Banjo Patterson, and it's all about doing everything that I've described. This man is walking around, living in the bush, sleeping with a swag bag. He kills a jumbuck, which is a sheep. The sheep's owner calls out for the police, but our kid who's living in the bush, he says, "You're never gonna catch me alive." So he flees from the police and he kills himself in a billabong so that they can't catch him.
Is that actually a murder ballad?
It's very close. It's more like a suicide ballad, but I think that...
But he killed the sheep. Does that count?
He did kill the sheep, and it wasn't his property, so he murdered the sheep. But yeah, then he went to the watering hole, which is what a billabong actually is. I never knew that either. And he killed himself. Waltzing Matilda, you'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Yeah, it's all about a guy taking a walk, killing a sheep, getting chased, and killing himself before the police could do it.
Well, all right. I feel much smarter.
We are cleansed, we are edified, we are ready to move on. Well, Brother Brad, before we are cleansed and edified, we had a dramatic reading of a text exchange. And there are a lot of different ways we can go with this. It all goes back to a song that I've been obsessed with forever. But as always, we're going to have you kick things off. Where do you want to go?
Well, I think we should touch on Harry Nilsson just real quick because...
Put the lime in the coconut and shake it all up. Yeah.
Right? And that's a huge part of my childhood, listening to that on a record at Grandpa's house. I don't know if you...
It was a 35 too, right? That's what the little records were called? Yeah.
Yeah. And it had the Ballad of Irving, the 100-and-something fastest gun in the West.
In the
157th fastest gun in the West. I believe that was on the B-side of that.
Oh my gosh.
Same album. But not Harry Nilsson.
No, it wasn't.
I don't think it was Harry Nilsson, but I think it was a B-side on... I think it was just a collection of weird songs.
Oh.
Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, I associate the two together, whether they were together or not, I don't know. But Harry Nilsson deserves a little bit of love, if nothing else, because he named one of his albums Nilsson Schmilsson, which is a fantastic name.
I did not know that.
That's the album that Coconut was on. But also on that album is his cover of the song Without You. I can't forget this evening, all your faces you were leaving.
Oh.
That's two very, very different genres on the same album. Just very fascinating guy. And he's got a couple things, like he did Everybody's Talking for Midnight Cowboy, which was on the same album as One is the Loneliest Number.
I didn't know any of these songs were his.
Well, I don't know how many of them are his and how many are covers, but he sang them all.
Yeah.
But so I was looking for connections just to connect him to murder ballads, and I couldn't really find one.
Mm-hmm.
But in the text exchange, you talked about him and John Lennon heckling the Smothers Brothers, which I find just glorious. And I wish I could have seen that. But there was a group of people who drank together called the Hollywood Vampires. It was Mickey Dolenz and Harry Nilsson, Keith Moon, and Alice Cooper.
Oh my gosh.
Ringo Starr, sometimes John Lennon. That was probably after one of their drinking sessions that John Lennon and Harry Nilsson left the Hollywood Vampires and went out. So that's almost a connection to murder ballads. But the best connection I can find is that he wrote 3 songs with Phil Spector, which I think automatically makes those murder ballads, right?
Something like that.
Anyway, I just want to talk about Harry Nilsson because I love Nilsson Schmilsson. Coconut was such a big part of my childhood growing up, listening to that record at Grandpa's house. I just thought he needed a little love.
Well, if Harry Nilsson didn't write a murder ballad, or at least perform one, he's got to be like one of the only people who's ever recorded more than 3 songs to have none of them be a murder ballad, because it seems like everybody has recorded a murder ballad. And you would think it would be, stemming from, and we should talk about the history of where murder ballads even come from. In the United States, they became kind of an Appalachian blues folk tradition. So they came out of that area, and dating all the way back to where a lot of those people came from, which is Scotland and England, going back to the mid-17th century, murder ballads were something always around. And the article that I thought did a really good job of explaining the history of murder ballads was called The History of Murder Ballads and the Women Who Flipped the Script by a woman named Karen Hogg. She gave a really good description of what murder ballads are for any of our listeners who aren't familiar. She said, originally the murder ballad subgenre sprung from the ballad tradition, a narrative song form that often depicted an event, which a ballad wouldn't have had to have been a murder ballad, but murder ballads came along quickly. While many ballads remembered and performed in the US today largely originate from the British Isles, there are various traditions from all over Europe. And in the US, many ballads come out of Appalachia, where the majority of the settlers were Anglo-Scottish. In this context, ballad has a different meaning from modern-day musical parlance. Historically, it's a song or a poem that describes a particular story with or without music. Broadside ballads were poems about real events that were printed and distributed to the public. Eventually, there were melodies added to some of these poems, and many renditions were performed by an array of musicians, which accounts for the variations of these songs. The broadside ballads were used to make money, chronicling a crime, and sometimes sold as souvenirs outside courthouses, which is crazy. They also acted as a way to convey information through communities, and in some ways, they were almost like tabloids. So, this tradition begins in the mid-1700s. It gets carried across the ocean, becomes an Appalachian and folk tradition here in the United States, and then basically every country singer since the beginning of time has performed one of them. And in many cases, mainstream artists, pop artists, indie singers, folk artists, rappers, you name it, everybody has done a murder ballad.
So, murder ballads, that's a very clear definition of it, but I want to pose a couple questions to see if these things qualify as murder ballads in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
What about Skid Row's 18 in Life?
I don't know what that song is, but
Ricky was a young boy, he had a heart of stone.
I would send a quick message to Steve Girding and ask him, and I bet he could tell me.
Well, he killed somebody.
Steve Girding?
Throws his wife away. Not Steve Girding.
Oh, good, because he's our brother-in-law.
Ricky, the young boy. He's got 18 in life to go.
So yeah, he kills a girl?
I don't know who dies, and I don't actually know that anybody dies.
Wait, didn't you just say, what did he do? What did Ricky do?
I don't know. He was a young boy and he had a heart of stone. I don't remember what he did.
So, I'm not...
So this was a bad example.
I'm not ready to declare it a murder ballad if we have no idea what Ricky did. Because the song might have stated that Ricky went to the bathroom 3 times a day, and sometimes he ate a cheeseburger.
He got 18 in life to go, so I'm assuming he killed somebody.
Oh, okay.
I made an assumption.
The jury is still out on that one.
All right. How about Bohemian Rhapsody?
I heard that it was, but I didn't look into why. So, Mama
just killed the man.
Yeah.
Put a gun up to his head. Pulled the trigger, now he's dead. Right?
So that is absolutely a murder ballad.
All right, that's a murder ballad.
It doesn't have every single characteristic of the most common murder ballad, but still a murder ballad.
All right, couple more. Copacabana.
No clue.
Barry Manilow. In there's a fight, and someone gets killed during the fight over the girl.
Was it an accidental homicide?
It was an argument that turned into a fight, which ended in a killing, I believe.
Well, maybe we can start a new genre called murder-adjacent ballads.
So not a murder ballad.
Murder-adjacent ballad.
Murder-adjacent. How about Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead?
Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, wicked witch. Ding
They're
dong,
celebrating the murder.
That is a joyful murder ballad, of which there are actually quite a few.
It's a good point, because I was going to ask you, is there a category that's just cheery murder ballads?
If there isn't, there should be.
There's the German song Die Moritat van Mackie Messer, which is more famously known as Mac the Knife in English.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Good old Louis Armstrong. And who is the guy that actually made it famous over here? Bobby Darin.
Yeah, Bobby Darin sang that one. But Louis Armstrong has several cheerful murder ballads.
Mm-hmm.
Would you consider I Shot the Sheriff to be a murder ballad?
I mean, it is. My only note on that one is I don't actually want to hear Eric Clapton's version of it.
No, me neither. How about Smooth Criminal by Michael Jackson?
Absolutely a murder ballad, and I had no idea.
And kind of cheery, right?
Yeah, Annie, are you okay? Are you okay, Annie?
She clearly is not okay!
CPR trainees are taught to ask the victims whether they're okay. So good old Michael Jackson comes out with a song that repeatedly says, Annie, are you okay? And kind of praises the stealthness of the criminal who got into her house and killed her. I mean, not directly, but you don't call a guy a smooth criminal if you don't want to at least give him some praise. I had no idea. I've heard Smooth Criminal 300 times in my life, maybe more. I had never once listened to any of the lyrics beyond him just going on and saying, Annie, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay, Annie?
I'm with you.
Yeah.
But so Maxwell's Silverhammer by the Beatles, that's kind of a cheery murder ballad.
I'll take your word for it.
The Kingston Trio singing Tom Dooley, that was part of our childhood. That's not exactly cheery.
Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. Was that a part of our childhood?
Yeah, Dad listened to them all the time.
Okay, so as I was listening to that today, I was thinking, oh, I'm very familiar with this song, because initially I was having a little trouble placing anything other than just being able to hum the chorus, but not even really knowing what was being said. And I thought to myself, there is no way that this wasn't in Father Art's wheelhouse.
Oh, yeah, Kingston Trio, definitely.
Had to be like the late 1950s or early
Yeah,
60s or something, so it's right where Dad would have needed it to be. That song is so good. I listened to it like 4 times today, and for anyone who's not familiar with that one, that just kind of as an entrance maybe into what some of these songs actually say. The ballad includes the words, I met her on the mountain, there I took her life, met her on the mountain, stabbed her with my knife. We believe this one is based on a guy from, I think, down in North Carolina who stabbed a woman in 1866 called Laura Foster in Wilkes County, North Carolina. He was convicted and hanged for the crime. Even though many people thought his former lover, Ann Melton, might have been involved, she was acquitted. So Tom Dooley was the one who paid the price. Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. And then in more recent history, the Chicks, formerly known as the Dixie Chicks, had a song about goodbye to Earl.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
actually, I feel like that might have been the first time. I wasn't necessarily in their wheelhouse, but at some point I heard Goodbye Earl and was like, wait a second, this is a really kind of upbeat, the women are winning the day, cheerful song, and it's getting rid of this guy who probably had it coming. And I remember even when I first heard that, I was like, this is cool. It's celebrating this thing that maybe we shouldn't be celebrating, but it's so fun. That's kind of cool.
There's the great dancing that's in the Dead South's In Hell I'll Be in Good Company, and that's kind of a chipper murder song.
Oh, for any of our listeners who have not heard the song is good, fine, whatever. But the video has some of the best dancing you'll see.
Fantastic.
Maybe this side of Thriller in terms of music videos. It is so phenomenal. Although stylistically, I might suggest that the dancing is somewhat different than what one observed in the video for Thriller.
But I have to say that whole genre of chipper murder ballads intrigues me greatly.
Yeah, there's some really fun ones out there, really unexpected ones, and plenty of them that you haven't really ever thought about what the lyrics were, and then as soon as you do, you're like, oh yeah, that was about that the whole time.
Ooh, one of my favorites, Rob Cantor's Shia LaBeouf.
I don't know that one.
You don't know Shia LaBeouf?
No.
You have to watch the YouTube video of it. Rob Cantor sings a song about having an epic battle with Shia LaBeouf in the woods, and there's murder involved.
Why is he fighting Shia LaBeouf in the woods?
Because Shia LaBeouf is an actual serial killer in this song. But you have to watch it. You'll love it. It is one of my favorite things on the internet.
Sounds good. Well, as joyful as many murder ballads can be, some of them are the exact opposite. They are dealing with things like murder. They are dealing with things like rape. In the text exchange that kicked off this entire podcast, there's somebody who basically gets decapitated on a train track, and there's a driving wheel involved in chopping the head off of the body. And it's just dirty and dark and nasty, and a lot of murder ballads get into that kind of stuff. I have a few that I would want to talk about for sure, in addition to, of course, talking about In the Pines itself, or Where Did You Sleep Last Night, which is the Nirvana cover of a much older folk song. Do you have songs that are less cheerful murder ballads that caught your interest?
Do you consider a song that is written specifically to be a murder ballad but isn't about a real murder to be a murder ballad?
I mean, is it talking about murder as a subject? It's just not a true murder?
It is.
Oh, yeah.
My favorite murder ballad is actually a song from Nick Cave and the Bad... I think it might have just been Nick Cave and not the Bad Seeds, but either way. Nick Cave and Kylie Minogue did a song called Where the Wild Roses Grow. And it's on an album called Murder Ballads. That he did a whole bunch of murder ballads. But I love that song. It's inspired by Charlie Monroe's Down in the Willow Garden, which I only know that song because Holly Hunter sings it to the baby they steal in Raising Arizona. Father sits at his cabin door, and it's super creepy, and she's got that thick southern accent, and it's got like feelings of deliverance behind it when she's singing this song to this poor baby. She's singing a murder ballad to the baby.
Nice. Well, actually, I think as an introduction to some of the other less cheerful murder ballads that we might both want to talk about, it's probably worth mentioning the one that kicked this off. I tend to think of this song as In the Pines. Historically, that's a name that you saw attached to it quite a bit. Some artists would call it Where Did You Sleep Last Night? It was commonly known by the name Black Girl or My Girl as well. But this is a song that has been recorded by, a couple hundred artists. And it is dark. It is creepy. It is all those things. And then Kurt Cobain sits on a stage in the mid 1990s and he sings this song. It's recorded. They ask him if he wants to do an encore because he finishes the show with the song that music historians, Appalachian music historians, it wasn't an unknown song. There were plenty of people who knew it, but there were a lot more people who wouldn't, and certainly wouldn't have expected Nirvana to be closing a set on MTV's Unplugged with it. But he sings this song. My girl, don't lie to me. Tell me, where did you sleep last night? And that introduces a theme that we see throughout a lot of these songs of saying that the female character in the song, implying that she might have been doing something that shouldn't be accepted by the general public. That type of theme appears in so many murder ballads in different ways, shapes, and forms, regardless of whose point of view the story is being told from. But he mentions that he's going where the cold wind blows in the pines where the sun don't ever shine, and he'll shiver the whole night through. He talks about a guy getting decapitated by a driving wheel of his train. And by the end of the song, I'm assuming that anybody who's heard this podcast has heard Kurt Cobain's version of what he called Where Did You Sleep Last Night? By the end of the song, he has just like a banshee wail. It is otherworldly, and I think that's part of the reason that people love this song so much. Allen Ginsberg said that Cobain's singing was incredible control, it was subtle, and it was almost as good as Leadbelly's. And that introduces another character named Huddy William Ledbetter, who was an African American performer in the mid 1900s. He had actually performed this song as well, and Kurt Cobain's version was based mostly on that. And Leadbelly was a guy, much like Kurt Cobain, who had some dark stuff that happened in his life. Leadbelly was in prison. There were homicides and things involved. He was in prison more than once. He sang about working hard. He sang about cowboys. He sang about liquor and women and racism and, of course, murder, all these different things. Kurt Cobain, coming out shortly before his death, it seemed almost prophetic when he sat there on that little chair with a few flowers just sitting around him, and he just wailed out this song. I just think it is otherworldly. And you can go back and you can listen to all different versions of it. You can listen to Dolly Parton singing or Loretta Lynn, incredible artists, people who I love. And they all do something special and they all do something different with it. And some of them call it Where Did You Sleep Last Night? Some of them call it In the Pines. And the song is powerful, even when it doesn't include the murder stuff. And it's a train song, like the longest train that I ever saw. The engine came by at 6 and the caboose came by at 9. That's what Loretta Lynn is singing. But even when she's singing about it, it has this funeral dirge quality and it's so powerful. I'm absolutely obsessed with this song in any form, but of course Kurt Cobain did something with it that I don't think anybody will ever forget.
That whole album is incredible. The Unplugged album is the reason I decided to learn to play the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
So, question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Leadbelly, Kurt Cobain, all this stuff. So if you were to pick the artist that is master of the murder ballad, I mean, there's Leadbelly, there's Johnny Cash, there's Warren Zevon, Louis Armstrong sang a bunch of them, tended to be chipper, but he sang a bunch of them. Who would be your master of the murder ballad?
For sake of not just creating an illusion by sending out a name and not knowing the history behind it, I can't say that I know of any one person. I know Johnny Cash was covering a bunch of them. I know Bob Dylan dipped his toes in those waters and often kind of changed them thematically into something that was, I think, better and more impactful than what the original versions were. But I don't think I can sit here and pretend that I do know who would be a master of the murder ballad. Do you have someone in mind?
I don't. I was just curious. Those are names that came to my mind. Those are people that I would associate with those types of songs. Totally forgot about Bob Dylan. So, question for you. Where would you put things like rap songs? Do those count as murder ballads? Because I didn't really think about that.
There are plenty of things which are focusing on the country, the bluegrass tradition, where murder ballads have the deepest roots in certainly American society. So, yes, it's easy to imagine from a tradition of country artists, somebody like Garth Brooks
Thunder
coming out
Rolls,
with
yeah.
The Thunder Rolls. And that's, all about a wife who's waiting for her husband and worried about him as he comes back home late. But when he comes home smelling of perfume, she runs back down the hallway and through the bedroom door. She reaches for his pistol kept in the dresser drawer, tells the lady in the mirror he won't do this again because tonight will be the last time. She'll wonder where he's been. So it's an easy jump to have somebody like Garth Brooks sing.
Right.
But we just talked about Michael Jackson singing a murder ballad. Absolutely a murder ballad, 100%. Different rap songs that are talking about gunning somebody down, whether it's in cold blood or
half of Eminem's songs, right, would be
yeah,
about murdering his ex-wife or girlfriend, whatever she was.
it doesn't matter in retaliation or in cold blood. And as we look through even the more traditional ones going back, it's a song over in Scotland or in England about a woman chucking her sister into a river out of jealousy. That's a cold-blooded murder of a sister. I think anytime that somebody is dying at the hands of another in any way, shape, or form, and in any musical genre, absolutely a murder ballad. Nursery rhymes are dark. Children's songs are dark. We've talked before. I'm sure there's one of those that is a murder ballad, even though I didn't look into that at all.
Bloody Mary has a couple that are associated with her, right? Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? That was about Bloody Mary killing Protestants.
Oh.
Three Blind Mice, also about killing Protestants, generally associated with three Protestant bishops that she had burned at the stake. The story goes that she blinded them and dismembered them before she had them killed, but that seems to be apocryphal. But you got London Bridge, which there's various stories behind that. One is that it's about Anne Boleyn, of course, was then beheaded because they take the key and lock her up. My Fair Lady is part of that London Bridge, one of the verses of London Bridge. Clearly, that's about Anne Boleyn, and then she gets killed. It's not necessarily a nursery rhyme, but I can remember people jumping rope to the chant, I guess, of Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. And when she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Do you remember that?
Yeah, well, anytime I was double dutching, that's what we were doing.
I remember people singing that when they were jumping rope, and I have no idea why, but I remember it. But yeah, there's some dark stuff when you get into nursery rhymes. So
Hansel and Gretel got put in an oven, didn't they?
Right. And you said it didn't have to be a song, right? It could be a poem.
And all these, the tradition of murder ballads started as broadside poems that were being handed out for all those reasons that I mentioned earlier.
So nursery rhymes would definitely count. But yeah, that's a whole genre of crazy stuff. I mean, not necessarily murder, but obviously Ring Around the Rosie is about the plague. And man, nursery rhymes are dark.
It seemed like a lot of the things that I looked at were talking about murder ballads in terms of the treatment of women in particular. And in many cases, placing the blame on a woman, even if she was the victim. Often the song would be sympathetic to the male character. And there's no hard and fast rules to murder ballads. There are plenty of women doing evil things and things that they should be arrested and considered the bad person for in these songs. But there are a lot more guys that are killing women, or in other ways, beating their wives, doing all these other things. Or the guy is doing something bad in many cases, but we're made to try and feel sympathetic toward his character and not the female character. There were many examples of all these things. Do you know of the Louvin brothers, Brad?
Yeah, I know a little bit about them. One of them is named Ira, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I know that Ira was shot 6 times by one of his wives.
And believe me, he had it coming. The fact that he wasn't shot more than that by that wife and more often than that by other people is kind of amazing.
And isn't the story that she said something like, if he lives, I'm going to shoot him again?
I believe it. It's been a while since I read the book about them, which I read.
Is that the one written by the other brother?
It's called Satan is Real, and yes, Charlie wrote it with some help, I believe. But it is a good read. If anybody's looking for the behind the music book, read about the Louvin brothers. So they were singing coming out of the wars in the mid-1900s. Ira passed away in 1965, but what they were really known for is their intense harmonies. Blood Harmony, which, what a name for a murder ballad, Blood Harmony. But their voices did absolutely complement each other, even if their actions didn't always. In fact, that's why they split up eventually, is because Charlie just couldn't take his younger and probably more I don't know if I want to say more talented, but the guy who had kind of the star quality was Ira, but he was volatile and he was drunk and he was acting in ways that got him shot by his own spouse. Ira was just that guy. So you'd imagine they'd sing lovely church songs, which they actually did, until they realized that they weren't ever getting to the Opry by singing these church songs. They had to sing some other stuff too. But one of their famous songs, and they have a number of them, is, well, I got started on the Louvin brothers because I was talking about just how despicable some of these murder ballads are. And one of their songs was known as the Knoxville Girl, which was a typical Appalachian murder ballad. It was derived from an Irish ballad called the Wexford Girl, which in turn derives from an English ballad of another kind. The Knoxville Girl follows a man who beats a woman to death, throws her in the river, but here's where the things turn. He beats a woman, throws her in a river, and then spends the rest of his life in prison with his friends not able to pay bail. Like, poor fella. Listen to some of the lyrics of this song. We went to take an evening walk about a mile from town. I picked a stick up off the ground and knocked that fair girl down. She fell down on her bended knees, for mercy she did cry. Oh, Willie, dear, don't kill me. I'm unprepared to die. And then it continues a little bit. She never spoke another word. I only beat her more until the ground around me within her blood did flow. And there are several more verses. It never gets better. At some point, he's dragging her around by her golden curls. He goes home and his mother asks him what he's been up to. How did you get your clothes so bloody? But then, yeah, at the end, he goes to jail and now he has to waste his life in this dirty old jail because he murdered that Knoxville girl, the girl I love so well. I mean, come on.
Sometimes you gotta take responsibility for your actions, I guess.
Yeah, and so we go through all these different songs, and there are similar things happening. You know, Michael Jackson, the criminal, he murdered the woman, but he did it smoothly. Going back to Tom Dooley, a man basically murders his fiance and is hanged.
Death Valley '69 by Sonic Youth, kind of an accidental killing, right? Out in the desert.
Yep, absolutely. Another genre that is just really kind of gross when you're actually looking at the words. One of the most famous murder ballads is called Omi Wise, and it tells the story of a murder of a woman named Naomi Wise, who was murdered in 1808. And she was murdered because her lover found out he had gotten her pregnant. So the lyrics say, John Lewis, will you tell me your mind? Do you intend to marry me or leave me behind? Little Omi, I'll tell you my mind. My mind is to drown you and to leave you behind. Have mercy on my baby and spare me my life. I'll go home a beggar and never be your wife. So by the end of the song, the woman is pleading for mercy from this man who has impregnated her. There's another one called Pearl Bryan, where a 22-year-old pregnant woman is beheaded by the man who got her pregnant. At least I believe that one was by the man who got her pregnant. So these are really, really nasty. And one in particular that, as I read the lyrics, as I read what it was about, I was like, ugh, I like this guy, but I don't love the fact that he recorded this song multiple times. It's Delia's Gone by Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
So this song, it's a song where the abuser is making the victim the target of who we're not supposed to like. So here's the real story. There was a girl named Delia Green. Back in 1900, she was an African-American girl, 14 years old, who was shot to death by her drunken boyfriend who went by the name Cooney Houston. And Cooney Houston got 12 years in jail. Meanwhile, Delia Green is buried in an unmarked grave in Savannah, Georgia now. Not only does this touch on the fact that women are treated so badly in many of these songs, you'll also find other themes that frequently pop up where African Americans or other groups are marginalized or treated unfairly. And this one is absolutely the case of that. Johnny Cash didn't create this, though. This was a song that already existed, and many times murder ballads are covered. But the reason I really object to Johnny Cash's version is because he went out of his way in his 1962 version to say that Delia was a cold, mean, and evil woman. It was the narrator attempting to place some of the blame on Delia so that a person shooting her multiple times, was more of a Goodbye Earl song. She had it coming, but that's not what the song originally was. And I say this as a fan of Johnny Cash, and every time one of his songs just comes down the track sounding like a train, I love it. But Delia's Gone is gross.
Yeah, there's quite a few songs in that genre where, not for the same reasons as you have, but I mean the Waila, Wila, however, whatever that one's called, that often sung by Irish bands. There was an old woman. She lived in the woods. She had a baby 3 months old. She had a penknife long and sharp. You can see where this is going, right? There's some despicable stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
I love the tune. I love the song, but
Yeah, and there are plenty of murder ballads that I will tap my toes to till the end of the time. I think Dooley is gone is out in that regard for me, but
I got you.
there is obviously a fascination with all things murder. With true crime has never been a bigger thing, and it's very easy to make connections between a 17th century Scottish murder ballad and how it was consumed tabloid style off of broadsides, in the same way that people are basically taking the true crime genre of Netflix and podcasts and all these other places and just hooking it up all day long on a drip. I mean, it seems like murder ballads have never gone away, and it doesn't seem like they probably will.
I certainly not personally interested in true crime stuff, especially when it
Nor am
gets
I.
into murder. I don't listen to any of that stuff, and
Nope. I don't listen to any of those at all. And in fact, as I've looked at which murder ballads are my favorite ones, a lot of times I didn't even know what they were singing about.
that's what I was gonna say. Yeah,
My wife, Shannon, she really hears lyrics first when she listens to songs.
right.
I hear the music
Same.
and often don't even know, I've heard songs 200 times that I can't sing the words to.
Same.
If there's a song that she heard once in 1984, she can probably at least spit out the chorus. If she heard it twice, she could sing it from top to bottom. And yeah, but I agree with you. True crime is not my genre.
I don't know the lyrics to anything, and that's where I was going with it, right? So I'm not necessarily a big fan of murder ballads, but I like a lot of songs that turned out to be close to murder ballads, if not murder ballads. It's interesting how many of them are out there that you never really thought about being murder ballads, even if you knew in the back of your mind that they probably were. You just never really thought about it.
And so you asked me a bunch of different songs and whether I considered them to be murder ballads.
Yeah.
So Dolly Parton, she covered a number of the common murder ballads that other people covered. Banks of the Ohio being a huge one that so many people sang. Silver Dagger being another one. She wrote her own murder ballad in the 1960s called The Bridge, which is basically a woman originally meets a guy under the bridge the first time. He gets her pregnant, and after he leaves, she returns to the bridge to commit suicide. Dolly said, "Here's where it started, and here's where I'll end it." So those are all real murder ballads. But do you know the story behind I Will Always Love You, which we all know from Whitney Houston, but I think many of us are aware Dolly Parton sang it. Do you know what that song is about or who it's to?
I don't know that I do know that, but on the Banks of Ohio, real quick, Olivia Newton-John covered that song.
She certainly did. And I listened to that song today. I wasn't expecting
Me
it. But yeah,
neither.
you can get from anywhere from those people playing their little instruments in the 1700s all the way up through up through her and beyond.
Yes.
But the reason I was bringing up Dolly Parton and why I was bringing up I Will Always Love You, well, let me describe the circumstances. She had come up as the supporting act for a guy named Porter Wagner, who sang himself plenty of murder ballads, but just like you had on many of the TV programs, and it was the same with radio programs right before that, you would have the star, whether it was in the earlier days on the radio, it was Bob Hope or Bing Crosby, they'd usually have a woman that wasn't necessarily on the show for their entire run of that show, but maybe for a few years. They'd have this very much second fiddle that would come out, but was always treated like a second fiddle to some degree. That was especially the case with Porter Wagner. He gave Dolly Parton an incredible opportunity after his previous girl singer, as they often would have called them, left his show. She took that opportunity and ran, and as soon as she started having her own success, Porter Wagner started getting jealous, started putting barriers in her way that would hold her back and make it harder for her to achieve success independently of him. So he wasn't being a good partner, and he wouldn't have seen himself as a partner. Well, eventually Dolly Parton, she knew she had to leave. She knew she had the skills to leave. She knew she was a bigger star, certainly at that stage, than Porter Wagner. As it turns out, she would become a bigger star than he ever was. But she still loved Porter Wagner. She still valued the contributions he had made to her career. She might not have had a career without him. So she didn't want to, flip him off and walk out the door. But she kind of did. She wrote a song called I Will Always Love You. And that was to Porter Wagner. It wasn't about a romantic thing. It was saying, I got to go, but I will always love you. It was basically this breakup letter. It was, a declaration of independence. And I think that even though it is not in the literal sense of a murder ballad, I would propose that Dolly Parton murdered Porter Wagoner by telling him, all right, buddy, you've held me back long enough. I love you, but I'm out the door. And showbiz-wise, it pretty much ended that day for Porter Wagoner.
So that brings up a topic then. If you can consider that murder ballad adjacent or a murder ballad of some sort. Murder. Songs that might not be murder ballads, but in the context that they're done, that I will associate with murder ballads. So Nick Cave, who I already mentioned, did a song called Red Right Hand, and that is the theme song for Peaky Blinders, which there's lots of murder going on there. Okay. And it just sounds like it should be a murder ballad, even though it's not technically. It's a crime ballad, maybe, a fight ballad, but it's not really a murder ballad exactly. But I like to think that it is. Stuck in the Middle with You, Steelers Wheel, that song that they played in Reservoir Dogs in the scene where guys killing some folks. That just feels like a murder song after you listen to it. And then something like Hip to Be Square by Huey Lewis and the News in American Psycho. That's the song that plays in the background when Christian Bale's killing somebody. So that feels like it becomes a murder ballad in my mind.
Gotcha.
I think there's cheery murder ballads. There's full-on murder ballads. There's murder adjacent. There's things that should be considered murder ballads because they make me think of murder when I hear them now because of something that most likely happened on a movie or television, but maybe some other story or somebody talked about it in a different way. But I think there's a whole nother genre there too. Nursery rhymes, that's its own genre of murder ballads.
Yeah, there's an unlimited supply of these, and I think as I listen to more and more music going forward, at least any of the songs that I actually hear the words to, I'll probably find a whole lot more. Well, Brother Brad, I think everybody's listened to us talk about murder ballads probably about as long as they're prepared to do so. But we haven't actually talked to our Father Art about it yet, so we're going to ask him some questions.
If Loretta Lynn told you that she saw the engine of a train pass by at 6 o'clock and the caboose pass by at 9, would you believe her?
Yes, I would, because there are some very, very curvy locations in her part of the woods.
You once famously declared that you don't have a favorite pillager. However, you are an established listener of songs. Can you think of any murder ballads that you have enjoyed?
No.
No. Because you're against murder ballads, or you just don't know
what
murder ballad is?
I just have a failing memory. But no.
What about a song by the Kingston Trio?
Oh, well.
Tom Dooley, perhaps.
Yeah, I was going to. Tom Dooley, but I don't remember that's a hang down your head Tom Dooley, but I don't remember that being about murder.
Well, I mean, he met the girl on the mountain, stabbed her with her knife.
I guess my favorite murder song would be Johnny Cash, where he killed a man just to watch him die.
Folsom Prison, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of Harry Nilsson's song Coconut? You put the lime in the coconut, you shake them both up.
I like it.
You like it. What would you think if Harry Nilsson and John Lennon got drunk and heckled the Smothers Brothers?
Well, I'm old enough to remember the Smothers Brothers, so I wouldn't like it.
Well, they did that.
Still don't like it.
Still don't like it. If you were a drinker and a heckler, would you get drunk with someone and heckle a band?
More likely an athletic team that I had disdain for, but yes, I would.
And who would be your chosen heckler mate?
Probably my friend Chris.
Well, folks, now that we've heard from Father Art, it means that our time together is coming to an end for this episode. We've said just about everything we're prepared to say about Leadbelly, Dolly Parton, Kurt Cobain, Death by Driving Wheel, Cooking German Children, and Harry Nilsson's album called Schmilson. But fear not, just as soon as we can dig back into the archives and find another gem of a text exchange, there will be another episode coming your way. In the meantime, you can head over to our Instagram page at Things I Text My Brother Podcast to drop us a note about what you liked, what you didn't like, or to tell us something that we got totally wrong. You might even have enough time to go tell a friend, an enemy, and a total stranger to give us a listen as well. If you manage to do any of that, the fraternity of Drouillard will be forever grateful. But most importantly, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
That's episode 13 would be Murder Ballads. Med. That's just how you have to say it, I think.
Yeah.
Med.
I'm eyeing those crackers I got in my chair.
Well, yeah, crackers.
Crackers. I gotta go to the bathroom.
All right, let the good times roll.
Yeah.